Bonjour, everybody. We now come on to a bit of paper. Agenda number 7, which is the report of the representative body, and I'd like to ask the Very Reverend Nigel Williams to present the report, please.
Your Grace, Chair, members of Governing Body, Nigel Williams, ex-officio member and Deputy Chair of the Representative Body. Firstly, unfortunately, Professor Medwyn Hughes is not able to be present at this meeting, so it falls to me to introduce the RB's report. You will see that Professor Hughes has provided a written statement to the Governing Body, which is Appendix 3 to the report you have amongst your papers, and I will refer to that in a moment. You will see from the agenda 2 motions will be put to you as part of this report. And before I introduce the report itself, I would like to begin by dealing with the first of those 2 motions, some proposed revisions to the Church in Wales's ethical investment policy. The proposed revisions are indicated within Appendix 2 to the report, which have been endorsed by the trustees of the representative body. You will see from the paper that these revisions come from recommendations made by the RB's Investment Committee and amount to changes in expression which will ensure that the Church in Wales's policy can be translated into everyday use by the RB's investment managers. These managers are making day-to-day investment decisions within the confines of this policy. More and more nowadays, this is being undertaken by AI, and our policy needs to be expressed in a way that will mean it will be understood by such systems. No changes to the substance of the policy are suggested, and all limits already in place within the policy will remain. Chair, I therefore propose the first motion on the agenda that the governing body adapt the revised ethical investment policy as set out within Appendix 2 to the RB report.
This will be formally seconded by the Venerable Paul McNess.
Paul McNess, elected Archdeacon, St David's Diocese and RB trustee. I formally second the motion.
It's now open to debate. If anybody would like to make any comments or ask any questions, please could you come up to the microphone. Carrie?
Carrie White, excuse me, elected lay from Bangor. Could I just ask, because I couldn't see it here, whether we also have something in these financial ethical details that encourage us to avoid investing in firms with aggressive tax avoidance or who are making use of tax havens and so on? Because financial probity wasn't something I could particularly see here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Dean Nigel, would you like to reply?
Thank you very much indeed for the question, and it is an extremely good one. I can see no reference in the policy to tax avoidance, and I think that it's something that needs to be debated, so we will refer that to the Investment Committee.
Thank you. We will now vote on that proposal. The decision is by a simple majority of the governing body. All those in favour, please show. And against? And abstentions? That is clearly carried. Thank you. Dean Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. The rest of the report includes a range of items the RB has been engaged with since its report to the governing body last September. Section 4 and Appendix 1 provide an update on the Church Growth Fund and the grants that have been made by the allocation group in recent months. Also, you will see that in response to a question time question submitted to the governing body in September 2024, a detailed review of the RB's salary structure has been undertaken by an independent external company, Krona HR. This process has been overseen by the RB's Human Resources Committee and has resulted in significant alteration to the pay structure for staff, with an outdated graded system replaced with wider pay bands. Salary progression will also be focused on performance-based system, which is a move away from the current system of automatic progression. This new structure will realise a cost saving and will be implemented on the 1st of January in 2027. At the meeting in September, the governing body asked the RB to reflect jointly with the Standing Committee on a statement the RB made in July of last year. This reflection took place at a joint meeting of the RB and the Standing Committee in early February. The discussion focused on the mechanisms we have within the Church in Wales to hold senior leaders to account, and what we do if something goes awry. Really, we have few options. So a small working party is being set up with membership of both the RB trustees and the Standing Committee to consider this question. Lastly, I draw attention to Appendix 3 of the report, which sets out a response to a private member's motion passed by the governing body last September. An important point to make here is that this motion has been prompted an undertaking of an enormous amount of complex and very detailed work. During the intervening months, Leon Hughes and Claire Thompson have worked hard as Chief Operating Officer and Director of Finance at the RB. They must both be applauded for the quality of work that they have produced. This rigorous and comprehensive work has informed the many discussions that have been taking place to address the question raised by this motion. Medwyn Hughes' statement captures the principal points of the situation as it is currently. You will see that the simple answer to the question the motion asked is no. The RB cannot increase support to ministry areas whilst maintaining the Church Growth Fund, and Medwyn's statement explains why this is the case. The crucial consideration when discussing the RB's finances is the distribution rate, the rate that investment income will be depleted if expenditure increases beyond sustainable levels. However, the thrust of the debate in September resonated and is not lost. And what needs to be worked out now is whether, how, and where the RB currently spends its financial resources matches the Church in Wales' wants and needs. As you will see, the intention is that a period of consultation with ministry areas is undertaken between now and September to try and delve into the question so that actual proposals can be formed. The list of bullet points on the final page of Medwyn's statement provides some key points for these discussions. You will see, however, that the RB has agreed that it will take over completely the cost of church insurance. This amounts to £2.6 million. That will mean ministry areas will no longer pay insurance premiums or administer insurance accounts with the Ecclesiastical Insurance Group. Last September's private motion really has prompted a generational opportunity to grapple with some fundamental elements of the financial structure of the Church in Wales. we have significant financial resources, and those resources produce the RB's income. That income must be used in a way that benefits the whole Church in Wales, and the governing body, via the private member's motion last year, has driven focus onto this very significant, far-reaching area of consideration. So this provides an interim statement on where we are currently, but further work and discussion is needed before substantive proposals can be formed and considered. That, Chair, concludes my remarks. So I propose the motion that the report of the RB be approved.
And this again will be formally seconded by Archdeacon Paul.
I formally second the motion.
Now is your opportunity to ask questions or make comments on the report of the RB. If you're intending to do so, could you please come up to each side? Honest.
Chair, Archbishop, bench bishops and colleagues, Monis Farah, Archdeacon Missioner from the Diocese of St. David's. The motion that was reported on number 3, the third report, Appendix 3, was a motion that was brought to the governing body by Mr. Nigel Evans and myself. And so I feel I need to just say a few comments on the report that we received. The first thing, I think it's not going to take a long time rehashing the whole thing. We've done that last time, and I'm really grateful for the governing body to support the motion that we need to have a thorough analysis. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But I remember the first time I joined the governing body when I moved back to Wales, I was co-opted in 2014, and I looked at the income of the investment. It was, I think, £42 million at the time. And I knew that a lot of the churches, and I inherited the church that some of my colleagues from that church are here. When I came back to the diocese, we were facing a £50,000 deficit with one of the most generous and financially supported churches. And it took me a while to negotiate with the bishop of how to restructure that debt or to restructure that deficit into a debt, which the Bishop Wyn Evans, accepted. And that's one of our strongest churches at the time in the province and had a huge income, but we were facing a deficit at that time. And so when I started mentioning that, the answer came exactly the same as the answer that we keep getting, and that is generational equity. And I think there is a problem with generational equity. We have generational equity of finance, which seems to take the top priority. But I would want to suggest that the top priority should be generational equity of faith presence in our communities. The two start with the same letter F, and I joked about that, and I hope it didn't cause offense to anybody. They start with the letter F, but they're very different. If we lose the generational equity of faith in our local community and presence, we struggle to regain it later on, and might increase the pressure on our local communities, which they're already experiencing horrendous pressure, on our clergy, which most of us feel, and I must say this, that we have become fundraisers of paying the ministry share. And a lot of clergy feel that, especially in smaller communities. And the pool is shrinking smaller and smaller. And the third thing is actually putting pressure on any impact of missional activities on the local ground beyond of what the church is doing already, because they feel exhausted just fundraising. They're not going to be thinking about what else can we do? Where can we take the gospel? How can it benefit our people in a fresh way? It's all good and well to have the big projects for the diocese, and I want to support that. I don't want, and my motion originally was very clear about protecting the growth fund. And then the last thing I want to just mention under this thing, generation equity. In the learning community that we had just after the pandemic, it was mentioned that we have a sell-by date for the church in Wales, that our membership is diminishing at a greater rate. In fact, since I joined the governing body and back to Wales, we've been talking about decline of about 5% per year. And one year, a few of our colleagues, the younger members of the GB, credit to them, stood up and said, we're not going to accept it without an amendment to that. And the amendment was, that's what released the first evangelism fund that happened then. Because we felt we cannot carry on going in that direction. And it is still going in that direction on two levels. The first level is loss of membership, loss of attendees, loss of people turning up to church, and that also means loss of giving. And the second thing, I notice I've got 1 minute.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Loss of giving. The other thing is aging generation and increased costs, which is going to cripple our churches. So I want to encourage us to look at releasing 7% from our funds, and that will deal with giving us 21 years as the document. And I want to thank Leon. I think they've done a great job, Leon and his colleague, for this. So thank you for listening. But it's generational equity of faith rather generational equity of finance. That's what I want to argue for. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Archdeacon. Could I remind governing body that we will have a chance to debate the actual recommendations that the RB will bring forward to us in hopefully September, and this is just for comments on RB report now.
Thank you, Chair. Nigel Evans, elected St David's Diocese, and some of you might remember I was very pleased to second Archdeacon Moniz' motion last time. I will preface what I'm about to say, but the fact is that on Sunday morning, going out to church, I had an opportunity to chat with Professor Medwin because he attends St Peter's Church, and so I asked him about the report. He did give me a bit of a nice short version of it is. I'm a church warden. I'm been involved in churches many times. In January, we were very pleased to have Archbishop Cherry with us in our church in St Peter's. Beautiful church. Recommend you come and have a look. But unfortunately, we also have, apart from all the monuments and all the other lovely things we got there, we've got buckets. So just before the service, one of my stewards said to me, Nige, because that's how I'm known, Nige, are you going to move the buckets because the Archbishop is coming? And the answer to that was, I'm sure the Archbishop has seen buckets in many churches all over our province, because that is the reality, leaky roofs and having to fix them. And also on a practical note, we had terrible weather, and the buckets were actually needed. The problem is, of course, that we're applying for massive grants to try and solve all this, and we're hoping for tenders to come back. But the problem is, on a day-to-day basis, our church committee, our treasurer, who's also in the room, has to worry, and I have to worry, that we have another leak, another bit of plaster falling down, another bit of red tape to keep an area safe, because then we have a choice, don't we? We have a choice to either spend our money on fixing the leak. We have a very good historic building guy who will do that for me. And sometimes he gets called out quite often. Or we have to decide on our ministry share. And that's a dilemma that lots of churches are having to face. On Monday evening, our LMA met to try and resolve how we were going to dissolve, or not dissolve, that'd be lovely, wouldn't it? Dissolve ministry share. That's a wonderful thing to think about. But no, how we would do our ministry share. And the
I'm
issue
sorry
was-
to interrupt, but
Sorry,
could you
1
make
minute.
a comment on the RB and not,
All right, I'll just come
just
into that,
give
Chair.
a speech? Thank you.
I apologise, Chair, because I do like an anecdote. But what came out of all that was we agreed, it was difficult, everybody had problems, everybody agreed about stewardship, everybody agreed that we have to be a generous people. And all I ask of the RB, as a simple church warden, members of the LMA, we expect our congregations, we encourage them to be generous in their stewardship. And I would ask that the RB to be generous in their stewardship and giving us money. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason Bray, Dean of Llandaff. Just sheer paranoia. Can I just check to make sure that the new insurance arrangements apply to cathedrals as well, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean. Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Crawford, Monmouth lay elected. Firstly, I'd like to repeat something that someone else has referenced, but I think this is alpha plus work that's been undertaken by the RB and its staff, and I really, really think this overall evaluation of resource allocation is extremely welcome and actually long overdue. I've got two questions. The first one is, given that the Church in Wales is operating an unfunded pension scheme and that all the risks that that offers, are there any current plans to address or change this situation? And what is the most recent legal and actuarial advice on this position? My second question is that I note that St Padans has been asked to evaluate its operational effectiveness, and that on a drawdown rate of 4% per annum, expenditure on St Padans accounts for 10% of annual expenditure, more or less. Does this review include a review of overall strategy and performance against the current strategy of the Church in Wales in terms of formation of ordinands, the provision of continuing professional development, and various other training programmes?
Thank you. Could I ask, if you are intending to speak, if you could come up so that we have some idea of how many people would like to make a comment? Oh, well.
Arwyl Davies, elected St David's, Your Grace Chair, members of governing body. In the light of this report, may I seek some clarification as to how these matters will impact on existing Tier 2 bids, which are already in the system, but have not yet been formally considered. A number of bids, including our own from the Diocese of St David's for music missioners, have been developed over very many months. In our case, we made our presentation, received feedback, and were expressly encouraged to revise and make more ambitious proposals to our project. We have done all of this, but they have not yet been formally considered, and they are in the queue for consideration. It was certainly my understanding in that process that bids already within the system would continue to be addressed on their merits, even if there were wider financial pressures or future changes to the fund. So my concern is, in the light of the report, that there is an implication that existing bids may be paused and that there may be a cap or adjustments introduced on other financial considerations. So I would ask, therefore, whether bids that have already been submitted and developed with the response to the feedback received will still be considered within the framework under which they were initially invited. And secondly, if the position will change, how will you address the position of those who have acted in good faith on what they were asked to do? If I can just finish one final point in Welsh, if I may. Rwy'n deall yn llwyr yr angen I adolygu costiau, ond rwyf yn credu bod pwynt pwysig yma ynghylch tegwch a chynnal hyder yn y prosesau y mae'r eglwys ei hun wedi gofyn i ni wneud. Diolch.
Thank you. Bob.
Bob Evans, elected lay, Monmouth. This is a very good and detailed RB report, and it has attached to it two very good and detailed reports, one on the Pearce Review and one on governance in Bangor. We are very good as a church, it seems to me, on producing these reports. We are very honest and we don't duck issues. We're not always so good on follow-up to the reports. I'm not concerned so much about the follow-up for the diocese and the immediate areas concerned, but I think there are lessons to be learned for the church as a whole from these reports, and I'm concerned that they might get lost if we're not careful. So I'd just like to ask the RB if they can find a way to make sure that we look at the general lessons, particularly from the governance report, and find a way of either bringing that back to governing body or promulgating it to the diocese. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy Grimwood, Archdeacon St Asaph. My first comment is as a blunt northerner, so you might have to forgive me, but us northerners sometimes say what we think. About 3 or 4 years ago, the previous Archbishop said that the #1 priority of the church in Wales was evangelism, church growth and mission. My question for the church in Wales, is this still the case? Simple question. But to be a little bit more nuanced about it, to ask the RB, how do we believe the need for resilience for our churches and our mission areas? How do we balance that whilst not losing our focus on growth and evangelism? What are the criteria going to be, and who's going to set those criteria? Question 2. In the RB's paper, reference is made to strategic priorities and coming up with those strategic priorities. Another question is, does there not need to be discussion either at governing body or at the bench of bishops about what the theological priorities or values of the church in Wales are before developing strategic priorities, thus making sure wherever our strategies are, they match our values as an organisation. Question 3, comment 3. On the 19th of March this year, myself and the Director of Operations for the Diocese of St Asaph travelled to Cardiff. We travelled to Cardiff to present a bid for a place called Pensarn. Pensarn is the most deprived community in Wales, according to Welsh Government statistics. As the train was pulling out of Newport, we travelled all the way down from Flint to Cardiff. As it was pulling out of Newport, we were told that meeting was cancelled. Now, my question really is, I suppose, one of governance in the Church of Wales. So the Church Growth Fund Allocation Group, or the representative body, must have made that decision on the 19th of March. Today is the 15th of April, and now governing body is discussing it. My question, I suppose, is why was that committee, or why was the RB allowed to make that decision prior to governing body making the decision? Who makes the decisions in the church in Wales? The governing body or the representative body? That, I suppose, is a governance question, but thank you.
Thank you. Richard Wood, elected Bangor. The jacket's gone, I'm not in the chair. In Appendix 3, Professor Medwin writes, I think, incredibly powerfully. The problem is that we don't have a clear view of what the future church looks like, and there is no consensus on what the structure should be to support it. I certainly agree with the second part of that. I disagree with the first. I think we have a very clear view of what the future church will look like at the moment. Very, very small, with very, very crumbling infrastructure and buildings. That is what our church looks like now. That's what it's going to look like in the future. The question about what structure should be to support it, to my mind, as I read this, and as I was part of the joint RB and Standing Committee meeting that discussed this, my concern is that we seem to be looking to provide answers to support a structure that isn't viable. Any Christian community, be that an individual church or a group of churches or a ministry area, mission area, however we look at ourselves as gathered Christian communities, if we are not within ourselves financially able to sustain our mission and ministry, we are not viable. If we cannot pay for the mission and ministry that we are undertaking, we are not viable. Now, there needs to be some wiggle room to cooperate with neighbours and to work well, and where there is wealth, to share that with where there is a need. We need all of that, and there needs to be some flexibility. But at a fundamental level, if we look at our local units of Christian community, and because our crumbling infrastructure and our buildings are such that they are taking our resource away first, such that we don't pay for our mission and ministry, then we have a fundamental problem. And all of this, to me, seems to be looking at a way to make sure that we can retain that scenario as long as possible. The enormous reserves that the Church in Wales have are enormous, but they're planned to be used in such a way to provide long-term support. To lump some of those back into the hands of parishes so that we can keep doing what we're doing would be absolutely ridiculous. Churches need to be able to support themselves financially first. The fact that we are seeking to retain the use of buildings that are well past their sell-by date, as beautiful and appreciated as they might be, they're also actually a lot of them ugly and badly made and not visited and not used. We're not realistic about this. If we just lump a load of money back into our parishes so that we can maintain that, then we're not answering the second part of that, is what structure should be to support our church. That structure should be planned to support a church that doesn't look like it does now, that doesn't look like it's going to if we don't do anything different, but that looks radically different. Thank you.
Thank you. Governing body, I am aware of the time. We need to come to the safeguarding report as well before we go to lunch, and so in accordance with Standing Order 5.4, the maximum time for speeches will be reduced to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Melanie Prince, elected clergy, St David's. I've got a thank you and 2 questions. First of all, thank you for what you're doing about the insurance. My 22 churches in my ministry area will be very grateful for the help and the support that gives to them. Many of them are struggling, so thank you on their behalf for that. But I've got 2 questions about the Growth Fund money. I noticed that the Tier 2 grants awarded come from only 3 of the 6 dioceses. I want to ask, is this because applications weren't received from across the province, or is it because applications were turned down? And my second question is related. What is the approval rate for the applications that have been submitted? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Dearden, elected to the Order of Laity in Bangor, also just for the record, a trustee of the Bangor Diocesan Board of Finance. Richard Wood's taken his jacket off. I think to speak in this debate, you have to have a waistcoat, looking at some of my earlier colleagues. If I can just echo thanks to Nigel Williams and also to the RB staff for Appendix 3. There's an awful lot of work gone into that and lots of careful consideration to put that in front of us, so my thanks there. Reading Appendix 3 reminded me of the words of St Augustine, something like, do not despair, one of the thieves was saved. Do not presume, one of the thieves was damned. Perhaps as it applies to money in the church in Wales, it's a way of saying that we do have some, but it won't go quite as far as we'd like, so we need to spend it wisely. Now, that might be easy if we were a transactional church serving up a menu of prayerful reflection and thoughtful preaching sermons every Sunday to our consumer congregations. But of course, we're not. We're called to be transformational, to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. And I suppose my point here is I'm slightly concerned that money which has hitherto been set aside for growth is being used potentially in the future for holding the line to carry on what we're doing. In other words, money that was supposed to be used for transforming the church being used for transactional things instead. And I think I'd just like to say that if we do go down the line of reallocating money from the growth fund to other purposes, I'd like to see it being used in some way to empower and inspire our churches to more and more be those engine rooms of growth. Many of them already are. But I think I'd like to see the focus not just on supporting our churches, but on supporting our churches to be more part of their communities, supporting our churches to spread the gospel, basically. And I think that will be a difficult process, but it's one we probably should keep in the back of our mind, because my own experience, at very least, is that if you put your heart in spreading the gospel, somehow the money does seem to follow afterwards.
Ruth Rowan, Co-opted Cleric, Diocese of Llandaff, and I promise the Chair I shan't take 3 minutes. On page 15, there's a proposal for a listening programme, and it particularly says that there is a proposal to have close involvement for ministry area leaders in relation to that programme. I'm grateful for that. It's good to see that there will be ground level involvement, but I'd be grateful if there was an equal emphasis on the involvement of lay people, because it's not only clergy who care how the church spends her money, and so whether perhaps that is extended to ministry area treasurers or another senior lay person or co-chair perhaps, but somebody within each ministry area. If the ministry area leader's opinion is sought and important, so too should be a lay person's, and I encourage that process maybe to take the views of lay people as well as clergy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Lightbourne, elected cleric, Monmouth Diocese. On page 14 of the report, it says, as part of the strategic discussion, it was noted that the key question, not a key question, the key question is what type of church do we want to invest in the future? Not sure if that has a solid answer to it as the key question. And of course, there may be many different views on what type of church we want to invest in actually looks like. I'd like to suggest that we need to be a church that stands alongside and invests in the poor. I'd like to know what percentage of our funds allocated go to, say, the bottom 5% of resilient communities across the nation. My suspicion is it won't take long to calculate. It's a well-known phenomenon in development economics where the money that's supposed to go to the very poor ends up going to lower middle-income countries because the metrics are easier, the return is quicker, you can count it. So the poor, the poorest of the poor, and on a global term they're called the bottom billion, get an absolutely derisory amount. How are we going to support our very poorest, least resilient communities, both rural and urban, where any metrics that we might want to put in place won't actually help? How are we going to go to those least resilient communities, and I want to stress again, rural and urban, and be the church in those places where models just don't mean anything? We have in my ministry area 2 of the poorest communities in Wales, and one of them in particular breaks my heart. Every time I go to Betis, I pray, how do we bless this place? How is that done? And so my plea is that we at least consider being explicit about being a church with, for, alongside the very poorest, and that we allocate an amount of money, say 5%, for the 5% least resilient in this great nation of ours. And we do that explicitly, and we throw the metrics out of the window and just get on with it.
Anthony Appleton, elected lay, St Asaph, and I promise you I'll be very short. Firstly, I'd like to reiterate the thanks about the insurance. I was really dreading having the conversation with our church treasurers about the increases coming through and all the trouble that that would bring. The other thing that I'd like to mention is I'd like to back up Archdeacon Andy's comments about the bid for the church in Penzance. Earlier today, we heard that uncertain of where we will be in 12 months' time. And this pause is causing uncertainty. Momentum on projects that have been well considered, well thought through, is potentially being lost. So therefore, could I urge that this pause, and in a pause, we get potentially fear that goes with uncertainty, loss of momentum on good projects. Could I urge that this pause be as short as possible and that the matter is resolved as quickly, then we can move on with these very, very good projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Dean Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. To respond just in the order that people have asked the questions as best I can. First of all, Mones, who has started all of this. And the same would go for Nigel Evans as well, I think. It is an opportunity for a once-in-a-lifetime debate. And as this has gathered momentum, as it has been discussed in some forums already, so it gathers more and more of a momentum, and it is genuinely seen as the opportunity that cannot be missed. That creates its own problems. The ADB trustees are very clear in that they want to consult widely on this. And the whole issue around the Church of the Future is something that has to go down right the way to grassroots. It has to be discussed with the people on the ground, the people who gather for worship in their various communities, and the people who are witnessing. And many people have made points along the same theme. So, in answer to your question, the consultation has got to be one that is comprehensive and works all the way through. But at the end of the day, the answer that the Growth Fund should be kept in its integrity is not possible as it was originally conceived. It is not possible to be able to have the 100 million Growth Fund and to provide resources for ministry areas. So finding the balance has to be something that takes place in the grassroots and the decisions taken in the Parliament of the Church, which is here in the governing body and the Standing Committee. I hope that that is a genuine response to your concerns, Mones. And I think that we are indebted to you for asking this question, but there's a huge amount of work that's gone in already. There's more work to be done, but we really do have to be honest with ourselves and ask very painful questions about the future church, what it needs to look like, and how it becomes effective in its ministry, its mission, and in evangelism. My fellow Dean, I am glad to say that the answer is yes. The insurance for cathedrals is going to be paid as part of this as well. I'm very grateful to Elizabeth Crawford, who put her questions forward beforehand, and so we've been able to compile a very comprehensive answer to what is quite a complex issue. So please bear with me in response to the really good questions that Elizabeth has posed. In relation to the one around the pension scheme, the legal advice given from Council on the structure of the clergy pension scheme confirmed the lawfulness of the existing scheme, a position that has been further demonstrated by successful registration of the scheme in 2024 with the pensions regulator. Council also advised seeking clarification with the Pension Protection Fund about the current status of the scheme in relation to the Pension Protection Levy. We have been in dialogue with the Pension Protection Fund since June 2023 on this point and await their determination. Although the immediate financial implications of any decisions from them would be limited as the government and the PPF reduced the 2025-2026 levy to zero for all pension schemes, given the healthy reserves of that fund. As to risk, the RB trustees consider the position of the scheme regularly, informed by a triennial valuation and a report from the actuaries. Although an unfunded scheme may sound inherently risky, whilst the RB maintains an overall asset base significantly in excess of the maximum pension liabilities, the risk to our clergy and pensioners is very low. However, any significant erosion of the RB's assets base is likely to change the risk calculations. Every 3 years, the RB trustee considers whether they should instead create a new funded scheme. The advice we have consistently received to date is that we would not be required to pay a higher proportion of our overall assets towards pension, leaving less funding for distribution to the diocese and to the wider church. So I'll reiterate that, just to make sure that you understand. The advice we have consistently received to date is that this would require committing a higher proportion of our overall assets towards pensions, leaving less funding to distribute to the diocese and the wider church. But we will keep asking and considering the question regularly. In relation to your question on St Padarns, the request to St Padarns to review operational expenditure follows a deep dive report written by the chair of the representative body. The findings of that exercise were discussed with a bench of bishops. A further report, which makes several... Sorry, I haven't got my paper with me. A working group has been tasked with implementing the recommendations. Its members will be the Archbishop, the lead bishop on ministry, which is Bishop Mary, the chair and deputy chair of the RB, the chief executive and the chief operating officer of the RB, and the principal of St Padarns. One of the recommendations to be implemented is to review overall operational expenditure at St Padarns, and it is that process that is being referred to in the report. If I carry on down my list, and Arwell's concern around the bids that are going into the allocation fund at the moment. It would be wrong of me to speak on behalf of the allocation fund. It has its own chair, but the system and the scheme is paused. That's where we are. That all the bids that are in place. The ones that have been heard and money allocated are honoured. The ones that have been prepared and are ready to be considered have been paused, and that is across the province while this process takes place. It's the decision of the allocation group to pause for the time being and there is no definite date as to when that will be moved forward. What I will say is the consultation process that takes place will hear concerns like Arwell's and like Andy Grimwood's loud and clear. And it will be up to the church to take its decision on where the priorities lie in terms of funding the future church. In terms of Bob Evans's question around the reports that are included as part of our paperwork, especially around governance and the lessons that need to be learned, that's been heard loud and clear. And thank you for raising that point. All too often we have reports and recommendations and we don't do anything with them, or it doesn't look as if we're doing anything with them. Those will be brought back and they will be duly considered, particularly by the representative body, and will be included in any future reports. In relation to Archdeacon Andy's questions around mission, growth and evangelism, and the questions around where decisions are taken, where we assess the values of the church, and why the allocation group paused the system, all the decisions need to be taken in the Parliament of the Church, which is its governing body and its standing committee. That has to be the priority. It has to be there that it's decided. And I think any pause that has taken place is to hear the consultation of the wider church before further progress is made, so that all voices are heard. Richard's question, and I would respond to you by saying all of us have to look beyond our own vested interest. I think Richard makes very good points in relation to the churches and the states that we are in and what kind of church we need to be in the future. Once again, I think that it points to the need for this consultation to be urgent and to move forward quickly. Melanie's question around the allocations, all the bids have been considered by the allocation group of the Growth Fund as they have come in. There has been consultation with the officers of the RB in relation to preparing those bids, but they have been decided on as they have come into the allocation group. Some dioceses have taken longer to make their bids, to put their proposals together, and others were ready to go at the outset. Christy Eden's question around moving money from transforming to being transitional, again, that's the decision that we take together as a governing body. The cries from ministry areas, mission areas have been heard, and from dioceses, loud and clear in the RB. We are spending our reserves. We're digging into our savings. How is RB going to help? And so the RB is turning to a wider consultation process now in making that decision rather than taking the decision on its own. Ruth makes a very valued point in terms of mission area leaders are mentioned in Medwyn's report. Yes, it does involve the whole of the mission area, but I think that mission area leaders would be expected to take the lead on that and would be expected to consult widely on the points that Medwyn has raised and any other points that they feel is relevant. I think Andrew Lightman makes a very poignant and crucial point. We all have places of deprivation in our diocese. We all have a deep concern for them. But the feeling is that that is a question for dioceses to address, not for the province to address. The allocation of money needs to be to dioceses, and for dioceses then to prioritise the way in which it is spent. And then thank you to Anthony for his question. I think I come once again to the whole point of the allocation had to be paused. It was a decision taken by the allocation group to pause. There are many, many worthy applications, but we need to decide how the money is going to be spent and how we want to resource the church moving forward to the future. There is one cake, and it can only be sliced into so many slices. How that cake is to be sliced will be a decision that the whole of the Church in Wales will have to take together. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now come to a vote on motion 2 that the report of the representative body be approved. The decision is again by a simple majority of the governing body. Those for, please show. And against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you very much. We will now go to lunch. Because we've had such a full and delightful debate, could you please be back from lunch by 1:45, when we will move on to our next agenda item. 1:45. We'll make the safeguarding presentation and update to the governing body. Ant.
Thank you, and good afternoon all. I'm going to give you a little bit of an update in respect of what safeguarding looks like in the Church in Wales. In preparing this presentation for you today, I firstly thought I'd reflect back on what I said to you when I was last here with you, which was 3 years ago in April 2023. And at that time, I talked about the need for improvement in safeguarding and the reasons for that. And it was very much in respect of the fact that we'd received adverse criticism in respect of our safeguarding approach. It had had a negative effect on the reputation of the church, people's trust and confidence in us, because of the fact that we weren't getting it right. There was a lack of consistency regarding our adherence to best practice and implementing required safeguarding procedures. And there was a need for good governance, leadership and culture. And I talked about all of those things because you've got to get the foundations right in order to have an effective safeguarding culture. So, in terms of what I said 3 years ago to you in 2023, what do things look like today? Did any of what I just say sound familiar? It certainly does to me, because the reality of where we are 3 years on is actually we've experienced all of those things again recently, and we continue to experience them. So the need for change, as far as I'm concerned, remains the same. We have made improvements, but I don't think that we've made sufficient progress, and that progress is too slow. I've also had a growing feeling that there's too much reliance on us as a safeguarding team to take forward the required safeguarding culture, but the reality is we cannot do it on our own. We rely on all of you to pull forward things with us. People need to know and meet their own safeguarding responsibilities, because it can't fall on us. I had a conversation actually with Matthew recently, and we talked about that strapline that we use about safeguarding being everyone's responsibility. And maybe the danger in terms of that messaging, you know, does that mean, well, okay, I haven't got to do anything because it's everybody's responsibility and somebody else will do it? But no, you know, what that means actually is, well, we've all got to play our part. You've all got to meet your duties and your responsibilities to safeguard people. So it's not a case of standing back. We need you all to pull with us. And I think by working together effectively, then we actually can reach our goals and embed that strong safeguarding culture and prevent harm and keep everybody safe. I wanted to give you an update in respect of what the casework currently looks like. And again, in putting these figures together for the presentation today, I reflected back to what things looked like in 2023. And you'll see the figures on the slide there. We were having a significant demand on us at that time. It was continuing to grow. The figures I put up there in respect of what I reported in April 2023 was in respect of what things looked like during the calendar year of 2022. You'll see the figures in terms of where we are now. We've continued to experience a massive increase. Certainly in the first quarter of this year, in these last 3 months, we've been averaging over 50 cases per month, which is an increase of over 5 times what it was when I first started enrolled back in 2021. So the increase of the casework that we are dealing with has been significant. The open cases you will see there, when I put this together at the end of March, it was 148 open cases compared to 68 when I came before governing body 3 years ago. There's quite a number of cases that we are waiting to close, but in reality, we've always got, at the very least, something like 115 to 120 open cases at any one time. Now, part of the reason for that is the increase in the safeguarding agreements and the risk management plans we've got. So all of that management of people who may present a risk of harm to others, that has significantly grown. 3 years ago, you'll see it was 32. I put 52 actually on this presentation, but when I've checked the figures with Wendy recently, it's actually 59. So we have now got sort of nearly twice as many safeguarding agreements and risk management plans in place than we did 3 years ago. So, you know, the increase in the casework is significant, but I see that largely as a success story, you know, because people are recognising the risks of harm and abuse, and we're able to respond to it. So I do see it as mostly a success story. There's another strapline that's sometimes used, which is the more you know, the more you see. And, you know, what we mean by that is, by having greater knowledge and understanding of the signs and the dangers in respect of harm and abuse, we're able to respond, and we're able to provide the support that is needed to prevent harm and abuse. And that's what we are seeing lots of, you know, so that's a positive. Of course, what it means for us as a team is that it's impacted greatly on our resourcing and our capacity. It has meant that we've needed an increase in resources. And to be honest, we still need an increase in resources to enable us not just to deal with the casework and be reactive. We need to be able to be proactive and preventative, and we need to be able to provide all of you with the help and support that you need to meet your safeguarding responsibilities. So that's the increase that we need currently, is, especially when I think of my role and Wendy's role, we need increased capacity to be able to sort of work alongside you and to support you, all of you, in respect of your responsibilities for safeguarding. Because there is still a lot of work to do in order for us to get into that proactive, preventative place and embed a healthy safeguarding culture. So an update in respect of training and engagement. Again, I put some figures up there for you. Those are the training figures for the last 3 years. You'll see that we've consistently, on an annual basis, been able to deliver roughly sort of 2,000 training places. That's what we've actually delivered on per year, which is quite an achievement, I think. So it shows there is good engagement in terms of attending training, but you'll also see that the number of places that we offer far exceeds those that are taken up. Now, that suggests to me that actually our capacity to deliver training is actually okay, because we're actually offering far more spaces than what people are taking up. What we do need to make sure of is that the people that do need training do actually attend, and that's where we need to focus. Because we're offering the training, we need to make sure that the right people are attending it. And the other part of what the training team do, of course, is that while they're delivering training, they're also engaging and providing the support and the guidance to all of you at a local level, in the mission and ministry areas. Also, we're engaging with the cathedrals so that you're able to meet your safeguarding responsibilities. Only recently, we've seen St Asaph and Bangor Diocese actually introduce that college, that networking approach for those local areas for us to be able to engage with them and support them. So we're now taking that forward in all of the 6 dioceses. But I think we need to do more in terms of providing that support, both in those local areas and also with the cathedrals. So that is, I think, an area of growth. But in summary, from a training and engagement perspective, I think we've got the capacity to deliver the training, and we're delivering the training well. But I think the demand will continue in terms of the engagement and support that we need to provide to everybody. And I think that engagement will grow because of our call, really, for everybody to step forward and use your leadership and influence to improve that overall safeguarding approach. A couple of months ago, Tony Young, the chair of Safeguarding Committee and Safeguarding Panel, and I presented to the joint meeting of the Standing Committee and the representative body trustees. That was the meeting in Cardiff Bay. And we talked through the joint paper that committee, panel and us as a team had put together in terms of measures that we felt were needed to strengthen safeguarding, particularly in respect of governance and leadership and embedding that safeguarding culture. And the reason why we produced that report is because we were continuing to see, not just us as a team, but committee members and panel members in us working with them, they were still seeing obstacles in the place of embedding that healthy safeguarding culture. It still doesn't seem to be embedded as business as usual. There's still some resistance in respect of people meeting their responsibilities. And sometimes that's not always an active resistance. Sometimes it's just apathy. You know, we need to be making sure that people understand what's expected of them and they need to meet those responsibilities. Because it's not just us as a team that can achieve that healthy safeguarding culture. But of course, if we are going to demand that from all of you, we have to be there to support you and to take you along those steps so that we can actually deliver effectively. So what needs to happen then out of those measures that we talked about in the report? Yeah, we are calling all of you to use your leadership and influence, because you are the people that have got the authority. I haven't. My team hasn't. We haven't got the authority to make things happen. We can be there to advise and support you, but we need you to take leadership and we need you to lead in respect of influencing people about what they need to do. So we need you to champion safeguarding. Encourage people to speak up. The Archbishop actually mentioned that this morning in terms of encouraging people to be open and to speak out about things. You know, we need that, and we need to take positive action when we encounter these issues. We need to continue increasing awareness and knowledge, so we need to make sure that people are attending training sessions. We need to make sure that people are consistently meeting the expected safeguarding approach. And with that comes compliance and some accountability. Now, what I've seen in my time in the church is the church doesn't always seem to like that compliance approach or that holding to account. They don't like accountability. You know, the way I look upon it is, well, how are we going to make sure then that people are meeting their responsibilities unless we check and test it? That's the reality. We have to do some of this to make sure that we've got the right approach to embed that healthy safeguarding culture. And that includes things like managing risk. You know, time and again, we are seeing examples of, you know, activities that haven't been assessed and managed properly, and therefore there's been either a risk of harm or harm has been caused. We are seeing that. Safer recruitment. Again, this week, I've seen an example of somebody that's being put into a post without the proper safer recruitment procedures being followed. We are seeing it time and time again. We've got to get it right. If I was to say to you today, right, do you know what? I want you to step back from role anybody that hasn't gone through a proper safer recruitment process or is up to date with it, and anybody that is not up to date with their safeguarding training. If I was to say that to you today, I know for a fact there will be a lot of people step back from roles because we haven't got it right, and we need to. So my overall message from addressing you today really is we still need to continue to make improvements. I urge you all to work with us, to use your leadership and influence, because I've got no doubt at all that if we all work effectively together, then we certainly will achieve what we need to in terms of safeguarding and keep everybody who engages with the church safe. That is my presentation. Chair, I am able to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much indeed. So does anybody have any comments or any questions? If they have, would they like to come up to this podium here? Honors?
Thank you, Anthony, for all that you do in safeguarding. Chair, Archbishop and bishops and colleagues, Monis Farah, Archdeacon Missioner. The question is, you mentioned the rise of the number of cases of safeguarding. Are these any that are new, present data, or is it historic stuff that we're becoming aware of it? It makes a difference because in England, for example, they're They're reporting increased discovery of historic cases, but less number of cases that are fresh and more contemporary. That'll be helpful to know, please.
Okay, thank you. It's a little bit of a mix of both. The greatest demand on us is the provision of advice in respect of safeguarding matters that arise which aren't church-based abuse. That's the biggest category of our work. But that is still, if you like, a risk of harm and abuse, or harm, that is seen by all of you, everybody working within the church. You see all of those issues, and obviously there is a need for us to intervene and support. We are clearly going to do that because it's in line with our values, you know, it's in line with our faith. We are there to help people stay safe. So that's the largest category. But we do get a significant number of cases of church-based abuse, and that, to be honest, is a mix of recent and non-recent. Some of the headlines that we've seen recently in respect of the criticism was because of perhaps non-recent issues, but we have had recent cases also that has caused us to receive some bad press and sort of some negativity. So it's a little bit of mix of both. But as I said, the increase is mostly around what I said about the good news story, about people are actually recognising the signs and the dangers now and actually are intervening to provide support.
Thank you.
Sue Rivers, lay-elected Llandaff. I'm just wondering, regarding the lack of uptake with training, is it because people are wearing so many hats that they have a role within the church? It might be as a ministry area warden, and then they're running a messy church, and then they're outside of the church, they might be run a scout group, and then many people are on the governing body of schools and could be a branch leader of Mothers Union. Each one of those organisations requires training to a certain level. And it could be, oh, I've got to go training again, I've already done it. And perhaps that could be one of the reluctance to engage as much. And the requirement for DBS, that is so complicated with, is it for children, is it for adults, is it barred, is it enhanced, and so on. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. I respond to that. In respect of attendance and training, the picture with regards to clergy is actually a lot better than it is in respect of the laity, is the truth. So we have more of an issue with people holding church officer roles, not attending training, than we do with clergy. And I do take the point that, yes, there are people who actually perform lots of different roles, and they may think, well, why have I got to attend this training now because I do it elsewhere? Well, I'm sure that there's other organisations wouldn't say to those people, oh, do you know what, if you've done your safeguarding training in the Church in Wales, you haven't got to do ours. They don't say that, you know, because there's a uniqueness around the safeguarding responsibilities depending on what the role you hold, and that's why we say you've got to do it with us. With regards to the DBS checking, yeah, do you know what, that's a massive challenge because it's never straightforward. And we've moved across to the new DBS provider recently, and that's caused an issue. But the reality is with DBS, because of the nature of the roles that we've got, you've got to assess people on an individual basis based on the role that they actually do. You can't really easily apply it in terms of a named title, because people might have the same named role, but actually the responsibilities are completely different. That's why we've always said to people, you have to apply the tests on an individual basis. And that that therefore causes the problem in terms of that subjective assessment. But we will do what we can to try and support that. But it is challenging, I accept that.
Thank you. Catherine.
Catherine Brooker, lay elected Monmouth. I'm going over slightly what we've just heard. I have nearly 40 years' experience with girl guiding. I have done safeguarding to, I may say, bishop level within girl guiding. Please, can we start to work with organisations? Because it gets very tedious when, as a volunteer, you're going over and over the same thing. I can see nods around the room, and it's something that we need to be working across organisations. As far as DBS, it's not the most difficult thing. As Chief Commissioner for Wales, I was responsible for DBS checking and what happened afterwards. It is possible, but please, can we work together? Thank you.
I accept that. I fully accept it, to be honest. I wish that we were able to work together. But we are held to account to make sure that we adhere to the Social Care Wales standards of training, which is why we have to say to people, you need to repeat our training. But I agree with you, if there was an opportunity collectively for all safeguarding organisations to work together, because we're all actually working to the same standards, that would be something positive. So maybe we'll get an opportunity to do that at some point, and maybe through the regional safeguarding boards in terms of working with us. But we'll see. I did engage with the recent review that Jan Pickles has been leading on for Welsh Government around the safeguarding across Wales and how that is delivered. Maybe out of that there could be opportunities, but we shall see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Helen Hayes, St Asaph Lay elected. I was pondering about this idea of people not engaging with safeguarding but wanting the team to do that. And I wonder if there's something cultural within not just the Church Wales but in our society. So we have this idea that there are people at risk and need safeguarding, and that the rest of us who look after them. And I think we maybe need to change our culture, that actually, given the right circumstances, I could be an adult at risk, as well as somebody that might be looking after other people who are at risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If there's anybody else who would like to make a comment or a question, could you please come up now? Yeah, I've seen Leonie. Leonie.
Leonie Oxenham, lay elected for Monmouth Diocese. More of a comment rather than a question, Ant, but some thanks from East Cardiff Ministry area in relation to the work that the safeguarding team provincially have done to support us. We've done a big safeguarding audit in East Cardiff Ministry area recently and looked at our compliance and what we need to do and safer recruiting, how we've been working and how we need to work moving forwards. We've worked very closely with the team and some of the documents that have come out, so the documentation that supports you to understand what sort of level of DBS check you might need for certain positions and responsibilities. Some of the work that I know is ongoing, which we're really ready to welcome around risk assessments being available onto the website, has been and will continue to be really valuable for ministry areas. I think we've seen a lot of understanding from people in our ministry area about the need for training. We've also had a lot of comments about repetition, but we've also experienced some reticence where there may be a culture of people perhaps feeling that they are being judged in terms of being a safeguarding risk, and therefore why would I need to do the training? I'm a safe person. So very much something about culture, and then linking that in with the broader question of compliance on a provincial level, I think would be really helpful for us to be able to continue to move forward and maintain that cultural change in compliance moving forward. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Ant. And please pass on our gratitude to you and your whole team for the great work that you do.
Okay, thank you.